and I've got some things to go over. Today, in this particular bit, I want to go over the $15 an hour minimum wage in general, but more specifically the policy that was pushed by Biden for the $15 an hour minimum wage. Now, there is a pretty big deal going on along here. I am not an economist. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to say that right now. But I do have a baseline understanding of economics. I've read Economics 101. I've studied baseline economics, and I have listened to multiple other sources talk about the baseline levels of economics that you would need to be able to talk about something like this. For example, Professor Richard D. Wolff. Very intelligent man. So basically, what we've got going on is the Biden is pushing for a $15 an hour minimum wage by 2025. What is a minimum wage? Well, or rather, why was the minimum wage established? We'll answer both of those before we go into this. The minimum wage is a number, it is a wage that is the minimum you are supposed to pay an employee. Pretty self-explanatory. Why is the minimum wage something that was even implemented? Well, historically, back before Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the 1930s and before, there was this issue where companies would pay workers nothing. Not literally nothing, but practically nothing. You would barely be able to afford food. The homelessness rate was insane. People were having to live multiple families to a house just to be able to survive. The elderly population was in pure poverty, just destitute as shit. It was bad. Children were paid less than adults, and thusly children were hired at a greater rate than adults because A, they could fit into machines and fix them, and that caused deaths, and B, they could undercut the pay of their parents, so you wouldn't have to pay the children as much as you had to pay the parents. So FDR implemented a federal minimum wage, the purpose of which was to make it to where a singular adult out of a family could work one job, and the minimum wage of that job would allow that family of four to live a comfortable life. A life of decency. Not a life where you struggle and go on food stamps and shit like that. No. You didn't have government assistance. You didn't need it. You could go to the movies once or twice a month, as well as save money to go on vacation once or twice a year. Have money set aside for emergencies. Be able to pay for your health care. That's the purpose of the minimum wage. It's actually prescribed into the law. We just haven't maintained it. And that's the big problem. Now, I will state, if minimum wage had kept pace with productivity the way that it was supposed to, we would be making $23 an hour baseline as a minimum wage. Because our productivity shot the fuck up. However, that didn't happen. There was quite a few things that happened after FDR died that caused that to just be dismantled overall. The Hart-Celler Act, Taft-Hartley Act, there's a few things. Now, something very important. This here was written 1938. The Economic Theory of Wage Regulation. This was in support of minimum wage. Two remedies proposed to check this tendency, which was the underpayment. Average yearly earnings had fallen to 270. Yeah. Low wages. Actually, not merely theoretical. Yeah. So the two remedies proposed to check this tendency are: first, unionism and collective bargaining, which I'm 100% in support of, and second, legal enactment. Both aim to set minimum of wages and working conditions below which the pressure of competition cannot force the workers. So, if you can't compete with another business because they're able to pay their workers and you're able to pay their workers roughly the same, but they're doing better, that's on you as a business owner, not on the workers. And you can't force their wages lower to compensate for your falling profits. You should never be able to force a worker's wages lower to compensate for you being more greedy. Cut your own fucking wages. Capitalist fucking pigs. So, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which this was written to support, was designed to achieve specific public policy goals through the use of a federally mandated minimum wage. It is interesting that the House altered the original bill to give Congress, rather than a separate wages and hours board, control over the minimum wage rate. Thus, since its beginning, the pursuit of these policy goals has been subject to political pressures facing Congress. Previous research, Silberman and Durden, Cow, Rubin, and Block, has found that interest group pressure significantly influenced congressional voting on both the passage of the original act and subsequent minimum wage increases. There are, however, many other endogenous features of minimum wage legislation, such as the level of the minimum wage, the effective date of the change, and the number of timing in this series of steps, as the control of Congress besides simply voting on the bill's passage. So that was a huge mistake in the construction of a minimum wage. But constitutionally, it has to be that way because of the Congress controlling the purse and regulate commerce. So there's a double-ended pincer that Congress has over the minimum wage constitutionally. And this is generally just a big support. It's a big page of support, 27 pages talking about how a federal minimum wage is good for workers and stuff, which this was written in 1912. And I believe British socialist economist, reformer, and co-founder of the London School of Economics. Oh, early member of the Fabian Society. But still a socialist. And so this here is a massive 900 plus page journal in which this 27 pages, which I did go over, Yeah, we may expect to find all the conditions of employment, wages not included one by one, authoritatively upheld by a definite legal minima, not in this or that trade, but in every industry, not in this or that country alone, but gradually throughout the civilized world. True. So, this is just a big plea, essentially, with economic grounding about how a minimum wage that is a living wage is actually really good for the economy, regardless of if it's a capitalist or a socialist economy. So we got that. Now, something that's a very common thread since the inception of a minimum wage is the disemployment effect. This isn't just it's not a conservative talking point, everybody. It's a real economic principle. It is something that happens over and over and over in a capitalist society. So it's not right-wing propaganda, but it is something that happens in capitalism. So, as I said at the beginning of this, the $15 an hour minimum wage is low compared to where it should be if our wages kept pace with productivity. I get it. They should be 23 an hour. But that didn't happen. It didn't. We stalled out. From the 60s till today, we've stalled and kept people in starvation. So that's not good. So the big deal to keep in mind is that if you raise the minimum wage, you can't just take it and put it with productivity and put it where it should be all at once, like I thought you might be able to. Because 8 months ago, a year ago, that's about where I was thinking you could just raise the minimum wage. What the fuck? Why haven't we done that? Why are we not at 23? Well, you actually can't do that. And it was really bad for me to assume you could. And it was even worse that I publicly said that we should. Now, I know that I A, don't have much reach, and B, am still learning shit. But I do know the basis of this. So we are currently at $7.25 an hour minimum wage, federally. Absolute dog shit. But there is a specific portion, attribute of the disemployment effect to keep in mind. If you raise wages more than 60% of the median average, the median of the average of the current minimum wage, within a small margin, you start to see jobs not only lay people off, but businesses start to go under and people not being able to hire. It causes problems. Now, if you do the math, which other people smarter than me have done, but if you do the math nationwide, that 60% number hovers around $14.89 per hour. 15 goes over that. But there's about a 1.2% margin over that it could go before things become really, really bad. You can, with the right kind of policy, you can stabilize that additional 11 cents per hour. $0.11 an hour didn't take much stabilization either. And so 15 by 2025 is actually the best plan that we could go with. And I'll tell you why. Because if we just moved it to $15 an hour, it would break that number. Like, we can't do it just suddenly because we would hit that over that 60% with over the margin that you could go, and it would be bad. The minimum wage has to be around $9.50 or $9.20, I think. Yeah, I think it's $9.20 for that disemployment number to move up to the point where 15 is within that margin. Or it's just under the margins by about 50 cents an hour, I think. And so you've got a cushion. So if you go 2021 to 2022, it goes 7.25 to 9.25. That's $2 an hour as a sudden increase. That's not gonna hit the economy too hard, but it will go up. As a matter of fact, what was minimum wage before 7.25? Okay. Do you see the trend? It just didn't move here. 20 cents here, which is a very big shift. And then it stabilized for 3 years, which is the stabilization period. Now, if you do jump it a good amount, for example, if it went from 7.25 to 11 all at once, and you just left it for 2 or 3 years, it would stabilize. But that's not the path they decided to go. They decided to raise it multiple times in smaller increments, which I think is actually the better position to go in, because that gets more people money quicker without causing shocks throughout the economy. And by throughout the economy, I mean damaging fucking workers, the people I actually care about here. And then let it sit, and then they moved it up 40 cents. And then 10, and then 20. And then it kept going up a bit by bit by bit. And then 96, it went up 50 cents. And so these increments are very small. This was the smallest increase. So let me just point out that moving it from 7.25 an hour to 9.20 an hour is the biggest increase proportionally since they made the goddamn minimum wage. Except maybe this one. This was 35 cents. That was almost doubling it. Oh, but that was after 5 years. So they didn't just... See, this was 5 cents, and then they just blasted it up. So they raised it by 1/5, 20%. and then they moved it up 33%. This was an almost 90% increase right here. It was like 91.4%, I think. I think I did that wrong. Maybe I just need to do 0.75 times 0.3. No, that doesn't come out right. Nah, it's like a 90-something% increase. I don't know how you do that math. Off the top of my head, I'd have to look up formulas for percentages from fractions and decimals. I'm not a math whiz. I have to look at other people's work. And this was a 25% increase, and this was a 15% increase, and this was a 12% increase. So, as you can see, so I guess proportionally the biggest one ever would be between 1945 and 1950. Because they went from 40 cents in 1949 to 75 cents in 1950, I'm sure. I don't know if they staged it out as an increase, incremental increase. But as far as this goes, $7.25 to $9 an hour, $9.20 an hour is, well, I think it's actually $9.25. It's just a solid $2 across, which is proportionally, so 1/7, so it's 2/7. I don't know why I closed that. Yeah, that's like a 45% increase. Not 45%, sorry. No. 28 something. It's below a 30% increase, but it's a $2 shift up. Anyways, the other thing that I found wonderful, like this is actually wonderful work in this bill. I got criticisms for Biden overall, but I can't be mad about this, unlike some grifters. So, this is something I dislike. Oh wait, it calls for an increase to end the tipped minimum wage. Good. Sub-minimum wage for people with disabilities. I dislike this concept of a sub-minimum wage for anyone, and eliminating that. The fact that it went to people with disabilities is probably the most heartless and evil part of it. But ending that is wonderful. So people can no longer make below minimum wage on restaurant work, although that could, in a sense, be bad because there's quite a decent number of restaurant workers that I've known who make a good amount off of tips, but there's those times where they're in some real fucking trouble because people can't tip. And in the pandemic, people can't fucking tip. And in Europe, people don't fucking tip because there's no need to. You pay your server. Student workers get below the minimum. Those under the age of 20. And workers with a physical or intellectual disability. Nope. Get rid of that. And then Biden took Bernie's line. There should be a national minimum wage of $15 an hour. Nobody working 40 hours a week should be living below the poverty line. Which is true as fuck. So, he signed an executive order to have the Office of Personnel Management provide recommendations for a $15 an hour minimum wage for federal workers as a starting point, which is good. And this is the federal minimum wage proposal by year, Raise the Wage Act. Raise the Wage Act. Okay. I've never been able to find the actual. Okay, so Raise the Wage Act PDF. I don't give a fuck about your bullshit. I just want to see the PDF. Okay, well this actually just lays it out here. Oh, it's $9.50. Sweet shit. I dislike tipped wages are being eliminated. Why is this saying $4.95? Nope. Eliminated. Eliminate all of these and just keep them tied to this. Ah, hey look, this has the criticisms. I didn't even go over this particular article. I just went over these 3 theoretical papers. Washington has the highest, is 1369, and Seattle having 1669 as the top state. Now, current $7.25 an hour. Garbage with garbage shit here. And then $2.25. So this is $1.50. This is $2.50. This is another $1.50. And this is $1. So, if this got passed this year, minimum wage go up to $9.50, I wouldn't be affected. 2022, it'd go up to $11, I wouldn't be affected. 2023, I would be affected. I'd be affected. I'd be affected. So this is actually really good because that disemployment line number moves with this. And it's being tied to the median, as I said. So if costs raise and the median raises, or actually if costs raise and inflation raises, or either one of those happen independently or they happen at once, wages will rise to compensate. So it's actually tying it to something that's effectively better than what I initially thought. Now you could tie it to productivity, which would, in theory, keep it up because we seem to be being more productive, but there's an argument against that, which is we could lose productivity. And if we just directly tie wages to productivity and productivity drops, well then wages also drop. And prices don't. You think a business is going to lower their fucking prices? Fuck no. Inflation still hits. So, there's that. You could tie it to inflation, which is better. And it's not a necessarily bad idea, even. But you just don't gain as much, as easily, as quickly as you would tying it to the median. The median's actually a better proposal because if inflation is a bit slower, and if businesses try to raise their prices, well, that raises their wages, which affects the median. And so your wages rise because they tried to raise costs to increase their profits, to increase their wages. So there's more to it than that, but that's a super simple breakdown. Like, very baseline, from my understanding, that's basically it. Oh, look at that. I didn't even check this out. I just kind of followed this to here. So, 2022, the 14C wages would be sitting barely better than where we are currently. But by 2025, they're at 15, youth wages at 13, tipped wages are at $12.95. So it phases out tipped work until by 2027, boom, everyone's at 15. Although by 2027, we could have everybody at 17. Did you go 16, 25, and then 17? Or 1650 and 17? From here, and then boom, here. And then when it reaches this point, they're at 1650. They're at... Just make it 15 at that point. It's 5 fucking pennies. This is ridiculous. Youth wage. See, now, I do understand an argument for youth wages being less. I understand the argument. I don't necessarily agree, but I understand it. And it's that people in high school, generally, as a general rule, don't have the same economic worries, the same responsibilities, the same financial needs that an adult with children has, or an adult in general who has to own a house or rent a house or something so that they don't, die on the street. Pretty popular thing Republicans like. Why not raise the minimum wage for everyone right away? Biden and other backers of the $15 an hour minimum wage will likely need to address it in a bill or package that's separate from the America Rescue Plan. The Senate voted 99-1 on an amendment to not raise the wage during the pandemic, which had the support of Bernie Sanders, who's probably the only motherfucker. That's a lie. Alright. Yep. What are the obstacles? The fact that it brings 900,000 people out of poverty. Jesus. I think it's better if they... Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and end this segment here. After I drop this bit of a thing. They need to drop this exact same bill as a standalone bill. Make Democrats vote against it. Use budget reconciliation. Make them vote against it. Bernie can do this. Biden can sign this. Kamala can push for this. But make the Democrats in the Senate who would hold this up under budget reconciliation vote no on it. We have a really good idea of who that is, and I know it sounds like force the vote. Bernie has the most political capital of anyone in DC. Anyone. And I know there's fucking dumbass lefties out there who are trying to condemn him because he voted not to defund the police like he said he wouldn't, and put forth a different proposal that is actually scientifically and criminologically backed. Like, it's literally the defund the police position, but they read that he didn't defund the police because there was a literal stripping funding from police exclusively. There's so many different ways you can go about this kind of shit. Anyways, They need to put it in a standalone bill. Bernie can put it up under budget reconciliation. If there's any number of Democrats who decide to vote no, I mean, this is a Biden policy. Biden is not left. Biden is slightly center-right. Now, a lot of these policies he's been putting out, pretty decent. They don't go far enough, but they are definitely better than nothing. Still mad about my stimmy. Where's my stimmy? But at least there's other good shit. Yeah. Yeah, the CBO is fucking bullshitting. And there's a massive takedown of this on Twitter. Which, yeah, it's a Twitter thread, but there's like major math and analytics and shit that they put into it. There are other studies that show in cities where the minimum wage was increased to more than $10 an hour, there was either a small loss of jobs or an increase, because more money in the pockets of people allows you to buy more commodities, and when people are buying commodities, it strengthens the economy, and that allows businesses to hire more fucking people. That's baseline economics, and anyone who tells you otherwise is an idiot, or they're lying to you. Because they don't want poor people to have money. They don't want a strong economy. They want a strong stock market for the wealthy. That's all they care about. They only care about their own money. Can they use budget reconciliation on a standalone bill? I may be wrong about that, but if they can, they need to do it. Standalone bill through budget reconciliation. Because it has to do with the fucking purse and shit. Or with the commerce. So, anyways, that's it. That's this segment. They need to put the $15 an hour bill in a standalone bill and make people vote against it on the House or on the Senate floor on the Democrat side if it's not going to go through. Find out who's not going to vote for it, and then just fucking nail them to the wall. Just make sure it's known. You make sure that you get those C-SPAN clips. You spread them everywhere. This senator voted no. You get the public voting record on it, and you throw that out there everywhere. This person said no to increasing your wages. This would have gotten you more money. You would have been safe. Your community would have been built up better by the cash flowing through it and throughout the country, making our economy stronger, making the country more stable, blah, 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 blah. All the U.S. fucking BS economic bullshit that they throw out there. But you can utilize that. Use their rhetoric. Morph your rhetoric the way Bernie did to appeal to liberals, and even take a bit of a shift to hit the conservatives. Because if you can plant those seeds in their heads, then they can start to maneuver your way. You just have to keep at it. You have to do it over and over and over, and you keep putting it out there. And you don't do it directly to them a lot of the time. You do it to, you direct it at a person who they look up to, and it will just spread to them. Because if you obliterate that person, they have to look inward and go, what was wrong with that person, and what's wrong with me? I followed them, and they were stupid. They looked foolish. They didn't help support me. But this guy, who I consider my enemy, is out here fighting for me. Maybe I should see what's going on. So, yep, okay, we're done here. Minimum wage, good thing. Increase it, $15 an hour, 2025. Make it $17 by 2027.